So, first, great to be here live for this event. I want to start off with something just for us to generally think about. If we look at where we were, okay, let's go backwards just a little bit in time. If you go back to 2019, as we got ready to roll into 2020, and there was an argument as to did the new decade start with 2020 or did it start with 2021? That part I really don't care much about. But I remember the end of 2019, everything was looking actually pretty good, right? Business was good, things were on an upward incline, we had probably the lowest unemployment that we'd had in a long time, and when we started the decade, it was like, wow, this is going to be great. And for those of us in this particular industry, I have to be candid with you. There are some of us that are not nearly as excited about that decade as others, as I'm looking down here at Spencer, young fellow, because some of us as baby boomers, we're realizing that we're probably now counting on our fingers and toes the number of years ahead, which is not nearly as exciting as it once was when I started in the industry back in 1991. And I remember Jerry Stevens, who actually hired me into the industry, said, and I think it was the first day, it might have been the second, but he looked at me and he said, son, let me tell you something. Be careful who you tick off. You may end up working for him one day. Which, by the way, was another good piece of advice and something that actually had come true. But here we are, we're going into 2020, and none of us anticipated that 2020 would be what it was. So, first thing, hats off to everybody in the room, because at this point, we all have experienced something that there is probably nobody else on the planet that has experienced, or if they did, they were like little itty-bitty babies going through a pandemic. So, hopefully, let's just say this as a positive note, we are on the backside of this pandemic and going into what could be a dramatically interesting and unique 2021. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at what happened. That's not going to hurt. We're going to look at what we learned, and then we're going to look at where we're going. The only problem with that is none of those have anything to do with R's, and I was tasked with the 3 R's of success. So I feel like a messed up Baptist preacher with my iterations going in the wrong direction because we were talking about W's. But I promise we're going to get to the R's. So let's do this for just a second. How did the coronavirus impact your business? All right? Now, I'm standing here, you're out there, there's some distance to us, but how did it impact your business? Because we went basically from full-on normal in January of 2020 to February of 2020 to March. Is there something weird getting ready to happen to holy crap, and the world changed? Now, there's an advantage to those of us in this industry, especially if you're doing the kind of stuff that we do, because we look at it from a nationwide basis. We really had a chance to look and see what was taking place on a very broad scale. So let's play a couple of broad scale things. What did we see? Number one, we saw increased cremation. Now, look, I live outside of Greenville, South Carolina, so let's just be really honest. If we kind of rewind the tape, I say rewind the tape, baby boomers understand what that is, Spencer. That means we used to have tape on 8-track or reel-to-reel, and with cassette, and you could rewind it. Okay, just so we're crystal clear. Okay, but if you go backwards a little bit in time, what happened? Well, if you had said, Greenville like the buckle of the Bible Belt, right? If you had gone and said in Greenville, South Carolina, the cremation rate would ever exceed 50%, we'd have said, you're crazy. And yet now it's exceeded 50%. And so then you sit back and you say, okay, and what happened this past year? Well, we weren't able to have the kinds of services that we want to have. We had increased number of people that were passing, and so consequently, I think everybody probably saw there was an increase in the cremation rate. The other thing that we saw was lower traditional averages at the beginning of the pandemic. What people used to do, they weren't able to do. They weren't going to be able to have a gathering. It was probably at best going to be graveside. If there was a gathering, it might have been limited to 10 people in a room. The probability the family was going to spend money on a chapel service is fairly slim. The chance that they were going to spend a lot of money on coach and carriage, probably fairly slim. Were they going to do the gathering where perhaps it was catered? Probably that was slim. In fact, that was functionally non-existent. What was going to happen at the cemetery? How was it going to take place? Now, this is a little thing weird to say. I hope you understand the spirit in which I'm saying this. But the other thing that we found was, if a family used life insurance to pay for the funeral, the average stayed higher. Now, let me say this so we're crystal clear. That is not an advertisement. I want to be crystal clear with everybody. I'm looking at stats. But the weird part was, when families came in, we found across the country that if a family was paying with cash, check, credit card, the average went lower. If they paid with insurance, here's what families said. Well, Mama had that MetLife policy, and that's what she wanted to use for the service, so I reckon we'll figure it out. And they used it. How? When they were cutting out things. Well, we saw they increased the casket average, or we saw they increased the out-of-burial container. It was a strange phenomena, but a phenomenon nonetheless that took place. We also saw initially, like a little over a year ago when the pandemic hit, that pre-need averages started going down. It used to be, look, I started in the industry back in 1991. In 93, went to Raleigh, North Carolina, to Motlon Memorial Park. I remember going in there. My background was accounting, but I was moved into the sales department. Everybody quit, by the way, except one lady, because they said an ABC doesn't know anything about SALES. And I said, what is an ABC? And they looked at me and they said, that's an administrative bean counter. And so I was like, well, apparently if I'm going to succeed in this, I've got to figure it out. And that's when I started going door to door selling cemetery property and figuring out, I saw it as a song, like one way or another. We're going to get you one way. So everybody that said no was just one more step to a yes. I hope you don't get offended at the appearance that I have in saying these things, but I figure we may as well have fun. By the way, I think there are great baby boomer songs that would make wonderful commercials in our industry. Can you imagine all of a sudden on the screen on your TV, dust in the wind, all we are is dust in the wind. And then it comes to the Cremation Society of blank. I mean, dude, the baby boomers would be like, oh man, that's cool. So anyway, but we saw short term, pre-needs were reduced because what typically happened? We had in-home sales that would take place after a service. It was called an aftercare visit, and that's the way it happened, except nobody was going into a home to do anything because it made no sense at that point in time. The other thing that we saw was there were increased immediate pre-need possibilities. Now we're going to talk about that in a minute because I've actually experienced how that played out, and it was a fascinating experience to be on the other end of. But the last thing that we found, and we've observed this now over the past 3 months, so it's enough data's coming in to see a trend, and that is now averages are increasing across the board by double digits. It's running about 12% higher average than if you went back to the time back in the pandemic. So in other words, if I'm comparing May of 2020 to May of 2021, the average has gone up by about 12%. And if you compare 2021 to 2019, the average is up over 4%. So it's interesting to look at what is an industry we've been through and where that's going to go. So remember, we're supposed to have the 3 R's, right? So let's play reflection. That's going to be our first R. And if you'll permit me, I'm going personal for just a second, okay? So there's a picture of my mama and my stepfather. Now I'm going to use both of these folks because there's 2 things that are very specific to our industry that has taken place that related to my mama and my stepfather. And of course, there's me over there. Okay, so first let's go backwards, and I'm going to talk about Mama. Now, my mother passed away about 4 years ago, so we're going back a little bit in reflection. And let me kind of play this out to you so you get a general sense of it. Every Thanksgiving-ish Christmas, when we would get together, as a family, We'd talk, and eventually the idea came up of pre-planning. And I said to my mom, I said, Mama, we need to talk about getting your pre-arrangement plans taken care of. Now, I'd been doing this for a number of years, so going into a home and talking with somebody about the wisdom and logic of making pre-arrangement plans was fairly easy. And she'd look at me and she says, boy, you've been doing this a long time. Do you not know what you're doing yet? And it was like, Mama, that is not what I'm talking about. She says, well, if it's about money, I've got money. I said, Mommy, it's not about the money. She says, well, if that's not the case, I want to go to www.zipit.com. I do not want to talk about this. And we wouldn't talk. So for years, that's how this played out. In 2016, my uncle passed away. Now, I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, but grew up in western North Carolina for the majority of my life. But Mom had lived in Maryland for a long, long time. Most of the family had been in Maryland. So when my uncle passed away, she said to me, she says, I've got to go to his funeral. She said, I think I'm going to go pre-plan. And I was like, Lord have mercy. This is amazing. Hallelujah. She said, can you come with me? I said, Mom, I'd love to. But I'm scheduled to be out in California. I've got to do a training program out there. I'm sorry, but this has been on the calendar for a long time. I'm just not going to be able to make it. She says, well, I said, but I've got a solution. I said, look, why don't you take out your smartphone, your mobile device? By the way, let me just go a little side note for this. Mama had a flip phone for a long time until we got these little smartphones. And one day she said, ooh, I'd like a phone like that. I said, all right. Let's just make that happen. So we went to the Verizon store. This was when the 6 Plus was a big deal. So we go to the Verizon store, trade her little flip phone in. She got a 6 Plus. She says, I don't know how to work that. I said, don't worry, Mama, I'll be happy to teach you how to do that. I'll come over on Sunday. I said, now you're going to have to give me your credit card so you can get the apps and stuff. She said, I don't give anybody my credit card. That's just not something I do for online things. I said, don't worry about it. We'll just put it on my account. Y'all, some of you remember the late David Whitener. David Whitener was an amazing guy. David Whitener was my sales mentor. Probably taught me everything I knew. New is bad, Cliff. I'm thinking new means I'm not here, so I have to think about how I say these things. But David Whitener had a saying. He said, no good deed goes unpunished. I hated that statement. I'm just going to tell you I hated the statement. But anyway, long story short, I told Mama, don't worry about it, I'll hook you up on my account. What I did not know was when I hooked her up on my account, all of my contacts transferred to her phone. I did not know that. It was not something that Chuck had a knowledge about. But it was okay because she didn't know how to use the phone. And this was on a Friday, and I was coming over on Sunday to show her how to use it. And on Saturday night, I go to make a telephone call on my phone, and there are no contacts. And I'm like, how is that? Well, I found out somehow it was intuitive enough for her just to slide and say delete, slide, delete, slide. 564 contacts in my phone she's deleted. So let me just point out, some of y'all were probably in my phone and you're still not there because I've been trying to figure out who it was and how to get them back. But that's a side note. I'll shut up on that. Anyway, Mama goes to pre-plan. I said to her, I said, Mama, call me and put it on speaker, and I'll be there with you virtually. She says, okay. So she goes to the funeral home up in Maryland that she wanted to choose. I'm sure they're thrilled that I'm putting this picture up there, but let me just tell you how it played out. She went to the funeral home. She walked in. She says, you're handling the service for my brother. I'd like to pre-plan today. And they said, ma'am, we're too busy. You're going to have to come back tomorrow, and send her away. Now, I don't know about y'all. I'm just going to say this to be realistic. I understand it's important to be busy, but if I'd have shot somebody if they'd have sent somebody walk in, say they want to pre-plan. Find a janitor, give them a Sprite, sit them down. I'm sure you can find somebody to talk to them, but that's my just perspective. So she got sent away. All right, we'll go backwards for just a second. So then she went to the cemetery. Now, I'm not going to name the cemetery, but I will tell you it is a goat ranch. I am sad to say that because I've been to a lot of cemeteries, and one that's not maintained and had been maintained for a long time up in Maryland, it was very sad. But everybody in the family had been buried there. So my mama goes in. Now, my stepfather there Military vet, 30 plus years, going to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. So she just needed to make arrangements for one space. So she goes into the folk at the cemetery. She sits down with the family service counselor. Now, I don't know if I'm trying to describe this correctly. My mother was part of the silent generation, born in 1937. In that generation, if you were driving a car, it's a Cadillac. I'm just saying. So when she got to Baltimore, Washington International Airport, she rented her a Cadillac. And here she is, she's driving to the cemetery, got her dingles and dangles on, in her St. John top, you know, one of them $1,400 tops you buy at Nordstrom. I used to tell Mom, I said, Mama, you could go to, TJ Maxx and get the Maxx for the minimum. You probably get a whole wardrobe for what you paid for one. I just like Nordstrom. They'll take it back, whatever. So here she is. She goes in, sits down with the family service counselor. Family service counselor, she says, I just need one space. I'm on speakerphone, y'all. I hear the guy on the other end. He says, ma'am, we've got this taken care of. He says, we've got a brand new section down near the maintenance shed. He said, it's $3,100. He said, it's space. You don't need one of them vaults. He said, we've got everything taken care of. He said, the only purpose for that is to keep the grave from sinking anyway. And we've got a marker, got your name, your birth date, and your death date on it. It's $3,100. What do you think? Now, I'm sitting there on the other end, baffled. I'm like, here the woman come in her Cadillac rental car. Got her dingles and dangles on, her top on, and all this kind of stuff, and he is trying to pitch her something down near the maintenance shed. So here's what I said. I was the voice through the phone. And I said back to the guy, I said, sir, I said, where is my grandmother laid to rest in your cemetery? He said, well, let me check. Look it up on the computer. It's the Garden of Reflection. I said, that's wonderful. I said, do you have any spaces there? He said, it's substantially sold out. I said, substantially sold out. Does that mean there is any single space there? He said, well, yeah, but that's $8,400. And I'm thinking to myself, did my mama talk to you about price? Is that an issue? I said to my mama through the telephone, you know, it's like here's the telephone and that's got the voice coming up. I said, Mama, do you want to be near your mother or the maintenance shed? She says, well, Mama, of course. I said, great. Still the voice through the phone. I said, do you all sell Wilbert out of burial containers? He said, rarely. I said, well, we'll probably do a Venetian or a Continental. And I said, do you sell Matthews memorials? He said, markers? Memorials. He said, well, yeah. I said, good. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a 24 by 30 half ledger, lasting memories, full color. I said the pictures of Mama when she was younger will be on the outside of the ledger and the older pictures will be on the inside till you get to the flower vase, because then her favorite flower is a sunflower. We can put that there and it's like she's gone to the light. Turns out it was $13,000, I don't know, $800 and some odd dollars. Then the guy on the phone said to me, y'all, I can't make this stuff up. He said to me, he says, I don't know how to fill out that contract. Now, y'all, I was with Stewart for a long time in sales and marketing, so I said to him, I said, son, take a picture of your contract and send it to me. Let me help you. So he literally took a picture of his contract, texted it to me, and I helped him fill out the contract that day. Now, that particular day, Mama went ahead and got everything at the cemetery taken care of. Next day, she comes back to the funeral home. Goes in, sachets herself on in, you know. Sits down to make funeral arrangements. Y'all, let me tell you. It was an amazing arrangement. It was beautiful. I sat there and I listened and it was like, okay, yesterday you sent her away. Today you've compensated. It's good. Till we got to the end. And at the end he says, well, I think we've gotten everything taken care of. And she was like, oh, that's wonderful. And then we come along and it's like, nothing was said about price, about how it was going to get paid for. So voice through the phone. I said, in Maryland, is this a trust state or are you funding this with insurance? He said, oh, well, here at Singleton, we don't guarantee our services. You know, with inflation being what it is, you never know what's going to happen. Now, if you don't have the money to pay for it, of course, my mama sitting there said, I got plenty of money, you know, because that was like poking her in the side. And he said, well, if you didn't, you could get a CD at the local bank next door, but otherwise, at the time of death, you'll just have to pay whatever the difference is. And so she walked away with her prearrangement plan all written down that was not paid for. All right. Now, some of y'all are sitting here thinking to myself, I've come to the SCCFA. This is the first dude supposed to be speaking about 3 R's, and he spent all this time talking about his mom and stepfather. So let me just talk to you a little bit and explain now why we did that. Okay, in the first place, go backwards for a second. When Mama passed away in 2017, now I'm going to offend somebody in the room, so let me just go ahead and prepare you for that so that we're all okay. I just want you to understand the mind of a baby boomer, okay? I was born on June 16, 1957, so I just had my birthday. I'm 64, so I'm now connected to the Paul McCartney song, Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? Okay, anyway, fortunately, maybe I'll make it to 65 and we'll find out. But when Mama passed away, no disrespect to the funeral home. Whoop, wrong way. Let's go back. Whoop, 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 whoop. There we go. There we go. No disrespect to the funeral home. See, maybe when I get young enough, I can remember which way to punch this little button. But no disrespect to the funeral home, but I had no loyalty to them. Why would I go to a funeral home in Maryland that I have zero connection with, that I really don't know anybody connected to, when in reality, living in Greenville, South Carolina, knowing that there are a number of funeral homes, and one of which I had actually worked for or with for some years, why would I do that? So, when hospice said, what funeral home are you using? And my stepfather looked at me and he said, what funeral home are we using? I said, well, we'll just use Mackey Mortuary, because that was a firm that used to be a Stewart firm, and I had had a relationship with them. So here's what happened there. Go backwards. I keep going the wrong way. Because they didn't lock everything in, I didn't have loyalty, which meant what they thought they might have from this piece of paper that said, here's our wish list, but not our guaranteed program, turned out to be a missed opportunity for them. Although we did know what Mom wanted. Yay. Okay, so we go to the funeral home, we sat down, we went through the arrangements, it was great. And in the process of doing that, Bob, my stepfather, he was sitting to my right. I was sitting here. Now, I don't mean disrespect to Bob, but he had early onset dementia. So the funeral director, it was a lovely lady, but the funeral director who was sitting there working us through the process recognized one thing. She and I had a connection. We knew I'm really the person that was kind of making the decisions, although she was talking to Bob, because that was the respectful thing to do. And if I sat there and just kind of smiled, it was good. And if I went, then she knew we needed to go in a different direction. But at the end, and this is important, at the end of the arrangements, Bob is sitting there. Now, he's got 30 plus years in the military, so he was really trying hard to just be the guy. But she looked at him. She said, Mr. Stroud, she said, I know today probably had to be one of the toughest days of your life. And Bob had been tough, but at that point, tears just started to stream down his face. He said, yeah. He said, I've had 2 heart attacks. I'm 9 years older than my wife. He said, never, ever in my wildest dreams did I believe that I would be the person sitting in this chair. I always knew she would be the person making these arrangements. It never crossed my mind. It is the toughest thing I've had to go through. And then she said, well, sir, I need to ask you a question, and I don't want to offend you. He said, little lady, he kind of perked up at this point in time. He said, little lady, I've seen things in this world that you can't imagine. Make your hair curl. She had curly hair. And he said, by the way, you got curly hair. It's right pretty. Because Bob was a flirter. He said, so you can't offend me. She then said, well, sir, she said, I've worked with a number of families over my 15-year career as a funeral director. And she said, here's the thing. She said, most everybody sitting in your chair wants the peace of mind of knowing they know what's going to take place. That nobody has to sit there and wonder at a later point in time what's going to happen. Now, I assume Chuck's going to be the person taking care of your arrangement. He reached over, pat me on the leg, and he said, you are, aren't you, son? I looked back and said, yes, sir. She said, now, it's taken us 2.5 hours to make your wife's arrangements. If you would like, it'll take maybe 5 to 7 minutes just to go ahead and prepare the contract for your pre-arrangements. We'll go ahead and get everything taken care of here today, so when you leave, you'll have the peace of mind of knowing it's done and never have to think about or worry about that again. Would you like to do that? He looked over at me and he said, what do you think? Which was a stupid question, because I believe in pre-planning. I said, I think that's a great idea. All right, little lady, go ahead and do that. And she left the room, brought him a little teeny can of Sprite, one of them little cans, not the big can, a little teeny can, whatever. Little teeny can of Sprite, left. 7 minutes later, she came back, arrangements were made. Now, what's the significance of that when you think about it and reflect on it? Number one, if you don't do something that is going to lock people into your organization, baby boomers aren't as loyal as some might think. So A, let's go here, they lost the call. B, the other funeral home was smart enough to recognize, here's an opportunity to help someone with pre-planning. Why do I need to wait to do an aftercare visit, to hope I can get into a home, to talk about something that could be handled right then and there with the simple time it takes to fill out a separate contract? Now, there's importance to that. By the way, we did make the right choice. Let me just say this for a second. We did make the right choice, okay? How do I know that? Because everything took place in Greenville, South Carolina that needed to. Now, we did have family in Maryland, so Mom was ultimately shipped to Singleton's for we could have a service for the people that lived in Maryland. And by the way, I made this beautiful video. If I have to pat myself on the back, I will. It was a gorgeous video, kind of a life tribute to her. Man, I was so excited about it. Walked into the funeral home and I said, how do we connect the computer to show the video? Is it VGA or HDMI? They looked at me and said, do you have it on VHS? Y'all, I can't make this up. This is 2017. I said, no. And they said, what about DVD? I looked at my Mac and I said, do you see a slot on there for a DVD? I don't think people do that much anymore. I said, well, that's all we got. I said, do y'all have a table with like a tablecloth? And they said, yeah. I said, good. I'll be back in about an hour. Drove down the street to Best Buy, bought a 70-inch Samsung 4K OLED TV with a Sonos soundbar, brought that puppy back, set it on the table, made sure that everybody gonna see my video because let's be honest, I'm a baby boomer and the world revolves around me, at least that's my generation, and they gonna see my mama's video, and that's the way it was gonna be. And when it was over, we packed up the TV, sent it home, and every time at night I watch TV, I can think about Mama because it was an estate tax deduction. I'm just saying. There's always a way to make something work. So, here's a question for you. Do you know what your customers are really saying? Because this is really leading us into the 3 R's. Number one, there was a Pew Research study. This was done at the end of 2018. So, okay, we're now 2 years into this. But at the end of 2018, how do you wish to pay for your parents' funeral was one of the questions. And the baby boom generation, that'd be me. That's a number of people. By the way, just quick question by show of hands. How many people in here born between 1946 and 1964? Raise your hand. Okay, everybody's hands up, y'all baby boomers. So we're some of the people that are probably your customers today. I don't mean we the people dying. Let me be crystal clear. We're your customer. What does that mean? That means that our parents are rapidly leaving this planet. That's the silent generation. And as they leave, we're the people sitting across the table from you making the arrangements, so we are your buyers. So what did we say? We said 88.6% of the time we hope our parents pre-plan. Let me stop for just a second. I want you to think about that. If you are dealing with a baby boomer that lost a parent, 88.6% of the time we want our parents to pre-plan. So the funeral director that asked my stepfather, do you want to go ahead and make arrangements, was smart to do that because after Mom died, he was a pussycat for 2 weeks. Then he got angry. And he was angry for 2 years. Then he finally calmed down a little bit. But nobody, not hospice, not the funeral home. At times, he didn't even want me coming by. So the chance of an aftercare visit and ever pre-planning him was going to be slim to none. It was wise that it was done when it was done. By the way, just so you're crystal clear, for those of you that are young, if you do not know who that man is, you need to. Because that's the reason us baby boomers are going to think we're going to be around forever. That's Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones. And the Rolling Stones still are all living, which is amazing, especially for him, because I'm quite confident he's been pumped full of embalming fluid or something because of the number of drugs he's used in his life. There is no reason he should be alive, but he still is. And in fact, in the summer of, let me think about this, 2020, the Rolling Stones were supposed to be in Charlotte, and some of the young guys that were employed in my business, we were all going to go to a Stones concert because I know they'd never seen the Rolling Stones and probably never go. And you know what? You just need to see Mick Jagger strut on stage. It's a phenomenon. And of course, COVID came and that's not taking place. But let me just share with you, I got notice the other day, the Eagles are on their Hotel California tour at Madison Square Gardens on April 22nd and 24th, and Chuck gonna be there because they're playing the whole album, and it's like, you know what, if I get a chance to see some of those folks, I'm gonna do it while I'm alive and while we can. I just hope the Delta variant don't go crazy. That's all I got to say. Now, what do we know? We know boomers believe in pre-planning. The question is for us, when? Okay? That's an important question because that is the marketplace for a lot of the work that we happen to be doing. The question becomes, how do we talk to them and when is that happening? So let me stop for just a second. I've had this debate, just so we're crystal clear, I've had this debate with folks from time to time. But here's how this played. All of a sudden, 2020, what happened? Everything dried up, nobody was going out, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe we can start to go back out. However, the people who were involved in prearrangement planning that pivoted to, wait a minute, I can do this via Zoom, I can do this online, I can do this with my iPad, I can help people get to where they want to be to help it. Baby boomers recognize there is mortality to life, and we do need to pre-plan. We just don't want you out of our house. And just be crystal clear about that. I live up on a mountain in western South Carolina, and if you live on the side of a mountain, there's probably a lot of trees, so trees hit the roof, and then of course they get in the gutters, and I'm about tired of that stuff. So, keeping in mind, I understand the concept of sales, I call gutter guard. And I said to the folk at Gutter Guard, I said, hey, can y'all come out and measure my house because I just don't want all those leaves in my gutters and I hate climbing up there and just digging through that stuff. He said, we'll have to come out to your house, sit down with you and your wife and explain our process. I said, no, you don't really need to do that. I know what a gutter guard is. I know what it looks like. I've seen it online. All you need to do is send your person up there with one of those little electronic measurement things. Just measure the house. Tell me what it is. Tell me what your price is, and we'll do business. He says, we can't do it that way. He said, we've got to come out to your house and explain it. I'm sitting there thinking, I'm back in the 90s selling cemetery property in-home door-to-door. This is just a little weird. I don't want you in my house, and my wife does not worry about whether it's gutter guard or something else. We just need to keep the leaves out. And he kept on, and I said, look, I'm going to tell y'all something just so we're crystal clear. I'm buying. You're selling. So you're going to sell it my way, or I'm going to buy from somebody else. Well, this is the only way we do it. Thanks. Bye. Boom. And I bought it from somebody else that would come out to the house, measure it, do it the way I want, sell it to me. I knew I wanted to buy. I just don't have to go through the process that we thought we used to have to go through. Now, that said, let's think about resetting. What is the new normal? What does that actually mean? Well, there's some good parts to the new normal, and then there's some parts to the new normal that aren't going to be as nice. So let's play some of the, it's not so good. There are going to be logistics delays. I don't think there's anybody in the room that probably operating your business that has not experienced something that deals with, I can't get the product that I'm looking for. It's not available on the container. I'm not trying to be funny by saying this, but it's on a slow boat from China, or a slow boat from China got it to LA. It's sitting on a boat somewhere, can't be offloaded, and if it is offloaded, there ain't nobody to drive the truck to get it here. So we all kind of understand that part of the new normal is rethinking what is a reasonable expectation for what is it that we have and how we deliver that. And where do we source it? Where are we getting our product from? Then there's the issue of higher prices. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I've been on this planet for 64 years. I have never seen housing prices like it is right now. Y'all ever seen anything like this? It's the doggonedest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's like, how? Now, my stepfather, Bob, you saw Bob on the screen. Bob passed away in January. Bob was a cool guy. Early onset dementia, lived to be 91 years old. Here's Bob. My president doesn't wear a mask. I ain't going to wear no mask. And he said, if I ever can't drive my Cadillac, you may as well kill me. And in early January, his caregiver, I called it his day wife because she'd come in at 7, stay till about 2:30 and leave. And then he'd get in his car and he'd drive over to Arizona Steakhouse in Simpsonville, South Carolina, get him a little toddy. Then he'd go buy groceries because he lived in the time if your refrigerator wasn't full, you might not have food. So he'd buy groceries. We threw more stuff out that just sat in the refrigerator and turned to mold, whatever. But he'd go buy groceries, take them home. Then he'd go back to Arizona Steakhouse and get him another toddy and get him some, little appetizers is what he'd call it. And that was his dinner. Well, on Wednesday, we found out his caregiver had COVID. She left. Thursday, he was fine. Friday, he was fine. Saturday, he was fine. Sunday, he wasn't feeling too good. Monday, he goes to the hospital. Full-on COVID. They gave him all the stuff that you can give, and 8 days later, he wasn't on this planet. Now, that is sad in one sense of the word, but on the other sense, I got to sit back and say, it was a quick out. He didn't spend a lot of time suffering. He got to drive his car up to 13 days or so before, I guess actually closer to that, 9 days before his death. So he never lost his ability to drive, and he was quite the character. And after his passing, we found in the house, as we were going through things, 227 black napkins from Arizona Steakhouse. Apparently, every time he went in to get a toddy in the afternoon and then dinner at night, he would steal a black napkin, just stick it in his pocket and take it with him. So a week after his passing, I went to Arizona Steakhouse. I said to the manager, or I said to the person, I said, is the manager there? Now, at restaurants, they're a little weird whenever you ask to speak to the manager straight out. They're like, is there a problem? I said, no, there's no problem. And so the manager, nice young lady, comes out and she said, sir, is there something I can help you with? I said, do you remember Bob Stroud? Yeah, we hadn't seen him for a while. I said, he died. Oh, that's so sad. He had a special place at the end of the bar. That's where he always sat. We heard all his war stories 15 times. And I said, yes, it's very sad, but I said, there is a positive side to this. She said, what is it? I said, I got 227 of y'all's black napkins. I reckon y'all got a service. It probably keeps them clean. You've probably been running a little short. But I say that to say, the house they bought back in 2014, 2015, went on the market, and it sold for $30,000 above asking price, and it was priced $100,000 above what we thought it should go for in the first place. There is no logical reason why it would happen that way, but we are seeing higher prices. And we probably, although everybody says inflation is not going to be a big thing, and perhaps it's not, but you saw lumber prices go crazy through the roof. And then you've seen some notices lately that the price of lumber's come down. But I got a simple question for you. By the way, don't have an answer to this. It's one of those rhetorical questions. But here's the question. If a 2x4 used to sell for $8 and then it sold for $40 and then it comes down to $20, will it ever go back to $8? And if it does, is the people going to sell it, ever going to sell it for just $8 plus the margin? I don't think so, but that's just an opinion. I could be wrong. And what about labor shortages? In just about every location you go to, it's hard to find folk that want to work. Now, look, I can feel this. I thought about this. Do I actually go down this road or not? I can feel it in my bones. I'm getting ready to take my foot off, stick it in my mouth, and somebody's going to get upset at me. This ain't political. Let me just say, it's not political, but I just need to talk to you about it because it's a practical thing. Okay, so we come along in the business and we got somebody hired and they've been paid $9 an hour, $10 an hour, $11 an hour. I'm just pulling some number out of the air, but they've been paid $10, $11 an hour. Okay? Let's just say it's your young'un. When I say youngin', I'm thinking of youngin'. It's like 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, okay? Some of y'all, we're in the South. Everybody know what a youngin' is. Okay, but if they've worked at McDonald's and McDonald's paid them $9.50 an hour, I'm just making this up, but McDonald's paid them $9.50 an hour, and that was the standard, and everybody was accustomed to that standard, this is all right. That's what you got paid. You got paid $9.50 an hour. But then the pandemic hits, and you're just like, you're laid off. Oh, crap, I'm not working. Okay, I'm drawing unemployment. Okay, I'm getting extra unemployment. Now, some people are like, well, that's just too much, and it got... But here's what's happened. Whether we like it or not doesn't make any difference. The mold was broken. I no longer work at McDonald's. I no longer work at the cemetery, going outside in the hot sweltering sun, weed whacking and whatever. I'm unemployed. What could I do? Where could I go? Well, if I was a weed whacker at the cemetery, but I can go to Lowe's Home Improvement or Home Depot and they'll pay me $16 an hour to take stuff off a truck and put it on a shelf. Why do I want to weed whack for $10? I'm just asking the question. Because I've heard plenty of people say, well, if it weren't for that unemployment, people would come back to work. We broke the mold. So whether we like it or not, this is why I'm saying it's not political. It's just whether we like it or not, the people who now we want to come back to work aren't anticipating coming back to work for the same thing they used to get. Because there are other alternatives out there, because everybody's looking. And work is work is work, and you're probably going to figure out, well, I don't have to work at McDonald's anymore because I can work someplace else and I can make more money. I might have never left the job and the security that I had unless I was forced to, and the pandemic forced a lot of people to do that, and it has changed the face of labor, again, whether we like it or not. Now, all three of those were really bad, but what about this? I mentioned this earlier. What about higher averages? Right now, across the country, March, April, May, we're in June, but for 3 months, literally coast to coast, for the most part, whether it's corporate or independent, and the companies that we do business with, the averages have gone up. And the question that we've asked is it inflation driving the average up? And so far the answer to that question is no. It hasn't been because of price increases. It's because families have seen value in what we do. So I would like to have, back up, time out. Mom died or dad died, whichever, during the pandemic. We couldn't have the kind of service we wanted. We weren't able to do the kinds of things that we wanted to do. It was sad. We preferred something different. Now someone passes, it's like we're going to do it right. And doing it right means they are generally choosing something better. We were talking with a major supplier. And the conversation with the major supplier went like this. Are y'all seeing higher averages? Yeah. I mean, it's not that our prices have gone up, it's literally the fact people are choosing better. You know, like if we were, I'm just making this easy for me because I can remember the names of stuff, but if it was a Monticello, maybe we're going to a Venetian. If it was a Venetian, maybe they went to a Continental. If we were looking at a bronze memorial, maybe instead of a 4414, it's a 5616. But we're looking at better. So we're seeing higher averages. And of course, we recognize mortality. If there's ever been a time that people recognize mortality, it's now. And what does that mean? That means prearrangement planning is kicking into gear. I was talking with someone earlier before the conference started. Conversation went like this. My daughter's in prearrangement planning, hit over $100,000 by the 19th of June. I mean, it's easily $100,000+ every month in prearrangement planning. Why? Because the baby boomers know we need to pre-plan. Because why? Let me just be really honest with you. My wife and I have 4 young'uns together. Second marriage, 2 for me, 2 for her, but we've got 4 young'uns. One lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. One lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. One lives in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, and the other one lives in Destin, Florida. 3 boys, 1 girl, and if my wife and I were killed in a truck accident in Greenville, South Carolina, what would the kids do? Well, I can tell you. The one in Raleigh, that's the oldest one, would say, well, I hope I am the executor of the estate because all those other children are bumbling idiots when it comes to money. And I'm the one that really should be able to handle the money because I'm the oldest. My oldest son, who lives in Charlotte, works for a company called Club Champion. They make custom golf clubs. He would be like, oh man, I used to talk to Dad all the time about business. Now I can't do that. So he would probably go to Topgolf with his buddies, get a couple of pitchers of beer, and take out some of his frustrations. My youngest son lives in Portland, Oregon. Finally got a job. Oh, hallelujah. Second month after his job, he calls me. He says, Dad, where's my rent check? I said, your rent check? He said, yeah. I said, Alex, haven't you gotten the paycheck? He said, yeah. I said, that's where your rent comes from. He said, well, Dad, if I have to pay my rent from my paycheck, I won't have any money to have fun. I said, that's how your mama and I have been for a long time now. We can go to the movies, except it's a pandemic. We can't, but that's okay. We'll save the money. You pay your own rent. And our daughter lives in Destin, Florida, and she is sweet as she can be, but she's married to an EOD tech with the Navy SEALs. Crazy people. I'm just telling you, them some crazy people. So she'd have a Facebook funeral. Y'all know what that is, right? All the pictures go on Facebook. Oh, Mama died. And then it'd be like, heart, sad face, heart. You hope you hit the care emoji. When people die, who hits like? That's just wrong, okay? I'm just saying. It's like somebody get cancer and you hit like. It's like, no, hit some other emoji besides that. But we understand pre-planning. So as baby boomers, here's the deal. If we don't pre-plan something that says we was important, they ain't going to. Because the four young'uns, what would they do? I'd be cremated. My wife would be cremated. They'd argue. No, there would be no argument over who had the cremated remains. That would be our daughter. Because the four boys would be like, what do I do with that stuff? And she'd put it in a cabinet somewhere, and then Cooper, the little French bulldog, would probably hit it, knock it over, and then we'd be in the rainbow vacuum cleaner, sucked up, put down the toilet. Down the toilet or something. So it's like if you want to do it, you got to plan it, and that's what our generation has figured out. So let's go to the third R, and we'll wrap things up. How do we rise? A couple of things to think about. Some new ideas. I'm not suggesting you should do these ideas. I'm showing you the ideas because I want to challenge our thinking. Because if we can think that we're doing the same old, then we're going to get the same old result, and that's probably a little bit old. So let's play with this. We do some insurance funding work for a cremation society. And they do about 1,800 cremations, give or take, in a given year. $795, $995, $795, $995. It's a cremation society. So we're sitting there, and as we were looking at 2018 going into 2019, we noticed that their average had gone up. The amount that they were doing business with us had gone up. And it was weird because $795, $995, or it was $27.95, $29.95. But it was always a $2,000 difference on what was being sold. And it was like, okay, this is strange. So I picked up the telephone. I called the owner of the cremation society. And I said, tell me what's happened. I said, because I noticed that your average goes up by $2,000 some of the time. Not all the time, but some of the time. He said, Chuck, it's the coolest thing. He said, we got this big, like, industrial drone. All right. He said, so people would come in. And he said, we would say to them, whenever they made their arrangements, what do you plan on doing with your loved one's remains? We call it cremains, but I don't understand it. With your loved one's remains. And the response would be, like in western South Carolina, well, I don't know, but Daddy kind of liked it up there in the mountains, so probably some pretty day we'll go up there to Table Rock and, scatter. And so he said, well, we've got the sunset scattering program. Huh? Let me explain it to you. We have a drone. We put the cremated remains in a container in the base of the drone. And he said, so here's the way this works. He said, I got this one guy. He said he is a commercial drone pilot, so he thinks he's hit the mother lode because that drone costs close to $30,000. So we're not talking one of them little DJI things. We're talking, it's a big old drone, okay? He said, in fact, he told me, he said, I could pick you up and hoist you over your house if you wanted to. And that's when, the 737 Maxes were falling out of the sky. I said, I think I'll pass. It's all right. I just take the pictures. But he said, here's what we do. He said, we put the cremated remains in the drone. He said, we've got this beautiful place where there's a nice brook. And he said, we set it level there. And the drone pilot, man, he thinks he's hit the mother lode because he gets to fly this thing. And it takes off and goes, And he said, we fly it up the riverbed. And he said, here it is. Got 8 spinners on this thing and a camera attached to each one of them. So you got a 360-degree view. He said, we fly it up the riverbed. And he said, then there's a waterfall, and we go up the waterfall. When you get to treetop level, it scares the birds, and the birds go flying off, and you can see it. And he said, then we fly it up through various ravines. It keeps getting a little bit higher until we crest the mountain. And he said, there it is. The sun sets. And he said, the drone pilot pulls a little trigger, and all of a sudden, cremated remains come flying out the bottom. Actually, it comes dropping out pretty quick, but you get the gist of it. And he said, here we are. He says, we got 8 cameras on this. He said, we bring it back. He said, I got a guy that graduated from the local technical institute in videography. He takes all the memory cards, sticks it in a nice big Apple computer. He takes all the angles, puts it together. And he said, then what do we have? He said, it's beautiful. He said, but you don't want to hear the sound of... He says, so we put music to it. It's kind of ethereal-like music that you'd hear if you went to Massage Envy or something. I don't know, but whatever. And he said, so we have this beautiful sound of water going trickling, and you have the sound of the waterfall. You just put all this stuff into it, because in video, everything is made up to be whatever you want it to be in the first place. And he said, finally, when you hit there, he said, then there's a picture of Daddy that just kind of fades into the light. So even if Daddy was a scoundrel, he got faded into the light. He said, we offer that as a $2,000 option for our families. 43% of the families chose that. So out of 1,800 people, 43% of them chose the $2,000 option, which was $1.5 million worth of revenue that otherwise it cost them $30,000 for the drone and 2 people. Now that's thinking outside the box. I'll also say to you, just so we're crystal clear in the room, if you're involved with the cemetery, that sucks. Because guess what happened? That's the last resting place right there. That's where the video's housed. So, the Cremation Society picked up a $2,000 add-on that had an insignificant cost that they totally controlled the cost of, delivered the video to them. The video lives in the cloud, so on Father's Day, daughter can sit there and she could look at her phone and think of Daddy. Daddy, I love you. Kiss the phone. And no matter what phone you got, it's living in the cloud, so you're always going to have the video. That's innovation. Play a different one real quick. An affiliate relationship. This affiliate relationship took place with the cemetery, and the cemetery basically said, look, what have we done as a cemetery? We believe that people will come to our location because it is a location-specific thing. But why does it need to be a location-specific thing? Like, for example, what if I decided that I was going to offer the option of non-location to me, but location to the University of South Carolina, or Duke University, or Carolina, or Clemson? I mean, can you imagine, I live up in Greenville, so that's close to Clemson. Can you imagine how much people would pay if there was a columbarium or something there close to Death Valley? That's funny, I'm sorry, but if that existed so that there was a place for people that could be laid to rest? And what if your cemetery was the organization that created that option? It's not at my place, it's at your place. We handle the record keeping and the process. How could we work out something that would expand the marketplace and give us the opportunity to provide service to families? Because in reality, the world we live in 2021, by the time we get to 2030 or 2031, we won't recognize it. It's going to be different. I mean, it's going to be dramatically different. In 1921, there's a fair chance most people knew how to saddle and bridle a horse. Nobody has a clue, unless you're an equestrian, nobody has a clue how to do that today. And I can promise you, I've got a brand new grandson coming into this world in August. And here's what's going to happen. By the time he's ready to drive, he ain't going to know how to drive, because the car will drive. Because if you can buy a Tesla now, and in 2 years-ish, maybe 3, just say, go here. Or as an old dude, because eventually I'll be that, I can say into my watch, pick me up at Whole Foods, and my Tesla come pick me up. I'm like, that's cool, because the kids can say, Daddy, you don't get the keys to the car no more. I don't need the keys to the car, because the car's smarter than I am. Or what about this affiliate relationship? This was kind of fascinating. This was a funeral home that decided to create a relationship with a hospice organization. Now think about how people feel for the most part about hospice. Mom or dad is admitted to hospice, and especially if it's been any period of time at all, people generally have a warm, kind, loving feeling toward the hospice provider. And if the hospice provider by chance was a nonprofit, if they're for profit, it's even easier, but if by chance it was a nonprofit, what would happen? What would take place if you partnered with the hospice to say to them, okay, here's the option that's available. We've got that. I'm going to make this really simple for me, just so we're crystal clear. I'm just going to call it the hospice cremation. And the price, let's assume for a moment, I'm going to make it simple for me. $7.95, $9.95. I'm going to make it $9.95 to make it simple. It's $9.95. However, if you're doing this through us at hospice, part of the way we are able to provide service is through charitable contributions. So what if that was really a $3,000 service, or make it easy for me, I'll do it in my head, a $4,000 service. If it was a $4,000 service and the hospice got $4,000 as a charitable contribution, and the funeral home got the $1,000 that they wanted, so therefore $3,000 of it was charitable, and if you're in a 25% tax bracket, that means the government just helped write off 25% of the funeral that otherwise you might have had someplace else or may not have had that nice at all. How do we change the possibility or the dynamic so that we can expand who it is and what we do? So I'm going to shut up with a couple of last statements. And by the way, as I say these, I'm going to be crystal clear in the room because I see a bunch of people that I know and a bunch of people who are really new to the industry. So the question is, are we writing this into retirement? Now, if you're 64 years old like I am, the probability that I'm sitting there saying, I wonder what am I going to be doing in the next 20 years, y'all, I hope I make it 20 years. I'm just going to say on the practical side, I'd be pretty happy if I did. Okay? So I may be looking at my business thinking I need to write it into retirement and hope that I'm going to be able to sell it or do something to convert it. Or I am going to be rising to future success. And if I'm going to rise to future success, what I have to do is think about what is the market asking for and where is it going? Because eventually, for all of us in the room, especially us baby boomers, we're going to be the folks that will be leaving this planet. And our children will be the children that are making decisions as to which direction they go. And no disrespect, but the children will be happy to spend $2,000 to be able to get something that they keep as a memento functionally for the rest of their life. Because today's Father's Day, and the question I would ask you is how many people are going to go to the cemetery today and put flowers on a grave? I don't think my children would likely do that. Not that they don't love me, but it's not their mode. In fact, my children aren't the folks that are going to go to the Hallmark store and buy a card. Rather, they're going to go on Facebook, send me a message or text me and say, hey, Daddy, happy Father's Day, I love you, which I get and I'm okay with, but the world is changing. Are we willing to change with it? So, today what we've done, we've reflected on what's taken place. We have reset some of what's happened in the past to think about what is the new normal that we've got, and we have recognized there is the possibility we can rise to the occasion because the largest number of people in the history of this country are going to ultimately be leaving this planet in the next 15 to 25-ish, maybe 30 years, based on Keith Richards. But recognizing those things are going to take place, we can rise to create things that are going to be absolutely amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking at 2021, then we got 22, 23, 24, and I think there's a brilliant opportunity for the Southern Cemetery Cremation and Funeral Association, and I'm honored to be here today. Thank you, everybody.